Each day, the promise of our nation begins again. Arkansas and America, moving forward. I help make that promise a reality. It's not for everyone, but people everywhere depend on us.
Oh, I love you too, sweetie.
Trucking delivers, or everything stops. And that's what drives me.
I did.
I'm Roby Brock, sitting here with Senator Tom Cotton. Good to have you in studio. I don't
Good
get
to
you
be
in
with you,
studio
Roby.
very much.
I know, it's good to be here.
Yeah, I can interrupt you a lot more when you're here, and I'm not on some signal delay out of Washington, D.C. It's good. Let's talk about, you have a town hall planned for Wednesday evening up in Northwest Arkansas. What are your expectations for this town hall? And maybe give a little background. You've had town halls before.
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to have a pretty good turnout. You know, we've moved venues twice now, from a 400-person venue to a 1,200-person venue, and settled on the Pat Walker Center at Springdale High School with 2,000 people. I hope that accommodates everyone, because I want to hear from Arkansans. As you said, I've held lots of town halls. We use lots of technologies and techniques to reach out to Arkansans. We use telephone town halls to reach senior citizens who can't get out of their homes, or elderly care centers, to young parents who maybe can't find daycare or babysitters for their kids. You know, here this week I've held roundtables with seniors about Medicare Advantage. Obviously, we get lots of phone calls and letters into our office, so we have lots of tools and techniques to listen to Arkansans. So I'm looking forward to the town hall Wednesday night. Would encourage everyone to come out at 4:45 on Wednesday night at the Pat Walker Center.
Is there a format? Is there an agenda? Is it just free flowing? How does this work?
No, I'll just be there to hear from
I know how it is when there's about a half a dozen people at the coffee table.
So I mean, you know, based on the contacts that we get in our office, the phone calls and the emails, I know people want to talk a lot about health care. They want to talk about jobs and the economy. They want to talk about national security and foreign policy. So I expect those will be three of the main topics on the agenda, just judging by the volume of phone calls and letters and emails that we get in their office. But come one, come all. I'll try to take as many questions as I can before we have to wrap up. And if we don't get to you, then you'll be able to submit a question in writing, and our office will get back to you.
I have known you since before you were Representative or Senator Tom Cotton. I knew you when you were Tom.
When we were on work release together?
Well, you know, I'm not going there, so never convicted, okay? I think that's the way that worked. You're a pretty opinionated guy. You're pretty strong in your positions. You make them pretty clear. I have not known you to shy away from a controversial issue ever. You typically are a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of where you're thinking on some things. Why have a town hall to hear from people if your position is made up? Do they persuade you? Are you letting something vent?
Well, I learn a lot from all my interactions with Arkansans, whether it's a town hall with 2,000 people or a single mom that came to Washington, D.C. when we're in session to lobby for me about more funding for critical disease research, for instance. So I'm never going to have unanimity. You know, if you can get 2/3 of the people agreeing with you in office, that's a pretty good position to be in as an elected official, but that still means 1 million Arkansans will disagree with you. But really, a week does not go by without me learning about a piece of legislation or a letter I might send or a call I might make to benefit Arkansans. So, you know, every time I get a chance to hear from Arkansans, I'm always happy to hear from them.
All right, let's take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit more on some deeper policy issues. Senator Tom Cotton, I'm Roby Brock. We're back right after this.
Arkansas Electric Cooperative Corporation provides electric energy across 2/3 of Arkansas. This is an exciting time in our energy history, with incredible progress being made in renewable energy and storage technologies. As our energy portfolio continues to diversify, we'll maintain an all-the-above strategy to provide reliable and affordable electricity. Ever since the first light bulbs were placed in our members' homes, the electric cooperatives have been the solutions provider for our members, and we want to continue that well into the future.
And welcome back. I'm with Senator Tom Cotton. Senator, let's turn our attention to some policy issues. Let's talk about, you sit on the Senate Intelligence Committee. It has certainly been a committee that...
It's an oxymoron. Like military intelligence.
No comment. Anyhow, Marco Rubio last Friday tweeted out something. I'm going to read it here for you. He says, "I am now very confident the Senate Intel Committee will conduct a thorough bipartisan investigation of Putin influence and interference Are you confident that the committee is doing what it needs to do in that respect?
Yes, absolutely. I've been confident from the very beginning. The Senate Intelligence Committee, like the Senate Armed Services Committee, is a very bipartisan committee. It does not have as much prominence in the public eye as Armed Services Committee does because we meet primarily in a classified setting. But our hearings into the threat that Russia poses to the United States and Russian efforts to undermine American interests, to include the integrity of our electoral process, date far back before this month, before the election. They go back to the beginning of my time in the Senate and on the Intelligence Committee in early 2015. And Richard Burr, the Republican chairman, and Mark Warner, the Democratic vice chair, have both said publicly that they're committed to a thorough inquiry of all of Russia's malign activities. Not just in the last 3 months, not just in the last year, but for many years going back. We've undertaken that inquiry already. We've had numerous hearings to date. Obviously, that's not happening in a public forum because this is some of the government's most sensitive classified information, but I can assure Arkansans that it is going very quickly, and we're going to follow the facts wherever they may lead us.
Where would you say we are in this investigation? Say if it was a football game, are we in the pregame warm-ups? Are we at halftime? Are we in the fourth quarter? Where do you kind of think the Intelligence Committee's work stands?
I'd say that we're certainly not in the warm-ups anymore, but we may be in the second quarter. The most immediate thing that we wanted to focus upon was the report that the intelligence community made public in early January about Russian efforts in their assessment to hack into the email of the Democratic National Committee and into the campaign chairman of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. We're pretty far along in that process. We're reviewing documents. We're making an assessment. And as I've said publicly, I have no reason to doubt the intelligence community's assessment. But now we're opening our lens a little bit more broadly as we move forward, again, to focus on all of Russia's malign activities against the United States and our interests, especially in the integrity of our electoral process. But that predates last November. It's been going on for a long time. The techniques and the practices that the Russian government has used date back to the Soviet era.
President Trump has obviously been warm and fuzzy, as some would describe, towards Vladimir Putin. That has rubbed a lot of people wrong on both sides of the political aisle there. Do you think the president is naive about Russia?
No, I think this president, like the last three presidents, would like to have a stronger, more productive relationship with Russia. But Donald Trump, if he doesn't negotiate and deal with Vladimir Putin from a position of strength, will wind up in the same position that Bill Clinton and George Bush and Barack Obama did, which is playing Charlie Brown to Vladimir Putin's Lucy, kicking the football. I think Donald Trump appreciates that, and whatever he said in an occasional interview or in a tweet, I would look at some of the actions he's taken, foremost among them the National Security Cabinet he's appointed just this week. He appointed H.R. McMaster as his National Security Advisor. I know General McMaster very well. He's legendary in the Army, and he's very much a Russia hawk. I'd also look at what some of those officials have said. Just in the last week, we've had Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis in Belgium, Vice President Pence in Germany, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Joe Dunford in Azerbaijan, all taking very tough lines on Russia, saying there's no basis on which we could cooperate at this time.
Let's turn our attention, just in the interest of time, to the border adjustment tax. You came out very strongly in your position on this. This is an idea that's been floated by some House Republicans, I think led by Speaker Ryan, if I'm not incorrect there. You said, I think I'm quoting you accurately on this, some ideas are so stupid only an intellectual could believe them. I'll give you a chance to maybe harp on that a little bit more. Why is this such a stupid idea?
So that was a quote.
Maybe who was that
was a quote from George Orwell. Okay. And as I said in that same speech, the border adjustment tax is a kind of Orwellian newspeak phrase. What it really is a tax on imports. It favors exports over imports. And almost everything that Arkansans buy when they go to Walmart, for example, is an import. Their jeans, their t-shirts, their sneakers, their kids' toys, Christmas gifts, decorations, almost everything is an import. That means that it's equivalent of a 20% increase of what Arkansans are paying when they go to Walmart. That's bad for the hundreds of thousands of Arkansans who shop there, bad for the tens of thousands of Arkansans who work there. That's true of other retailers as well, like Dillard's and other small retailers, but Walmart is obviously our biggest retailer. Now, the claims that some people make about this tax on imports is that it will create a stronger dollar, and the increase in the value of the dollar will offset the 20% tax on imports. Now, I can't imagine that anybody would actually believe that we can predict with precision what's going to happen in the foreign currency markets. If all of these economists and intellectuals could do that, they'd be out making billions of dollars trading the
They
dollar.
wouldn't be economists, I can assure you that. So,
They'd be billionaires on their yachts in the Caribbean.
so what's the correct way to fix trade imbalances, which is really the crux of why this idea was proposed?
Well, first we need to reform our tax code, and this is the border adjustment tax, the tax on imports, is really an effort to postpone or avoid some of the harder choices in our about reforming our tax code. I've long said in my campaigns and in public office that I want to simplify our tax code and make it fairer and make it work for working Arkansans. To adjust our trade imbalance, we need to make America an attractive place to do business and to send our products abroad. Obviously, a lot of Arkansans depend on the export economy. Our farmers and our foresters, for instance, depend heavily upon that. But if we want to bring jobs back to the United States, bring them back to Arkansas, we need to have that fairer and simpler tax code. We need a regulatory environment that protects health and safety and the environment, but also makes us welcoming to businesses. If we do that with the level of skill we have in our workforce in America, with the benefits of being domestically produced for the American market, I have no doubt that the American economy will be booming again.
You're going to get a lot of questions on Wednesday night at this town hall meeting. You're going to get a lot of questions about healthcare reform, undoing, repealing, and replacing Obamacare. I think I have heard every potential scenario for what may happen: a quick repeal and replace, a not quick repeal and replace, a fix. We're going to scrap it. We're going to do. Where is your position on what needs to happen in this respect?
Well, I want to get health care reform right. I'm not as concerned about getting it fast, although this is a top priority of ours, and I expect we'll move forward with legislation sometime in the next 2 or 3 months at the minimum. But Obamacare has made our health care system worse. Before Obamacare, it had a lot of problems. It cost too much, not enough people had access to health insurance, and health insurance didn't give the kind of coverage that people needed. Obamacare supposedly solved those problems. In reality, it's made those problems worse for a lot of people. So after we repeal Obamacare, I want to focus on solving those problems, on making health care affordable and personalized for everyone so they can make the right choices for themselves and their families.
Will health insurance companies go along with that, though? They need some certainty. They need something to be able to base their rates on. And if you're talking about repealing it with no replacement in sight, how do you do that?
Well, I think those two things need to happen as quickly as possible in conjunction with each other, repealing Obamacare and adopting new health care reforms that will actually serve the interest of working Arkansans. But there's a difference between the time in which we pass legislation and the time in which that legislation goes into effect. Obamacare was passed after 15 months of debate in 2010. It didn't go entirely into effect for another 3.5 years. So there'll be at least some transition period so the market can adjust and we don't see the kind of chaos and disorder that happened in 2013 when Obamacare launched.
One of the trade-offs with the Affordable Care Act was Medicare took a cut, and that would go to the Medicaid expansion, which later became kind of a state option right there. Do you support the restoration of Medicare in terms of that, if Medicaid is going to get pulled?
Well, I don't like the kind of across-the-board draconian cuts that was imposed on Medicare providers, doctors, nurses, hospitals, and so forth. Some people say that's not a cut to the beneficiaries, but it really is, because if you're cutting how much we pay doctors to see Medicare beneficiaries, then they're going to be able to see fewer doctors. So I don't like those kind of cuts. Now, we need some reforms to Medicare. Medicaid ultimately is probably going to have to be a part of health care reform, because it was so tied up with Obamacare. And what I would like to see on Medicaid expansion is much greater authority and discretion granted to our state governments. So our governor and our legislature can make the right decisions for Arkansans and the population that needs Medicaid in Arkansas, which is very different from who needs it in, say, California or Washington or Maine or Florida. So that I expect will be part of broader health care reform, which is cutting a lot of the red tape and the strings that are attached to that Medicaid money from Washington.
Last question to you on this subject, and we'll need to wrap up after this. Are you going to be a driver on this debate? I mean, you're on the Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committee. This is not really your wheelhouse in terms of committee assignment work, but it's a pretty big issue in terms of constituents. And
I expect to be very active in it, obviously, for Arkansans. one of the biggest sources of day-to-day anxiety is the cost of health insurance. As premiums go up, as co-pays and deductibles go up, making those insurance premiums less valuable. And while I'm not on the committees that may be writing it, the Senate's a small place, and a lot of the work gets done in individual interactions, and we have a small majority, so we can't afford to sacrifice too many votes, so we have to work towards the interest of every individual senator, and I expect to be very involved in that and making sure that we get a solution that works for Arkansans.
Well, you're pretty shy, so I don't know if you'll be willing to speak up or not when the time comes, but hopefully you will. Senator Tom Cotton, thank you as always for making time with us.
Good to be on with you.
Appreciate you. That is all. Thank you so much for watching today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.
Circuits turn on the lights by making a connection, by closing the loop. At Entergy, we believe our economy is circular too. What you put in comes back. So we invest billions in new infrastructure, which helps attract new industry, which helps create new jobs. We partner with local communities to electrify the economy, and together we power life. Entergy.